All right. Okay. So if you could tell me, do you see my screen now? You might need to unmute because I can't see the chat screen.
Yeah, we see it.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, awesome. Okay, so again, we're going to kind of go over about how you get those points. All right, so again, Tina introduced me, but I'm from Rockcastle County High School, and I think I've taught AP Lit now for 16 years. I can't really remember. All the years kind of blur together, but I've been an AP reader now for about 10. And of course, I do the AP study sessions. I have to say I prefer it when they're in person. It may be easier for you all because you don't have to get up as early and ride the bus to wherever we're presenting from. But all right, okay. So again, go ahead and just shout out to me. Like, what are you wanting to learn today? Like, and what are you hoping to gain from this session? Go ahead and talk to me. You'll have to remember, I can't see the chat. So
Hey guys, this is Tina here. If you want to put it in the chat, I'll feed the questions to Susan.
Thank you, Tina.
So go ahead and use the chat and I'll tell Susan what.
So what are you hoping to learn today, or what are you hoping to get from this session?
Olivia says, I hope to gain a full understanding of the rubric. Okay. Want to focus on getting the points I keep missing. Okay. What's the structure of the exam? Any COVID changes?
Oh, okay. All right. I'll go ahead and address that. The day of the exam will vary depending upon your school. Okay. My students are taking the exam on the second date that's available, which is, I believe, May 18th. And that is a digital version. Okay, so if you are testing in early May, then your school has the option of a paper exam. Okay, I think maybe paper or digital. But if you take the second date, it is a digital version. It's the full exam. It's the full exam. It's the multiple choice. It'll be the 3 essays. AP has released an app which students can access. I think it's available starting maybe at the end of this week, where they can log in and access the type of the program, kind of play around with it, see what the tools are that you can use digitally to help you out with the exam, like annotation tools and practice. So everything will be on the computer if you use the digital version. There is no, last year kids could handwrite and take pictures of their essays, which caused lots of problems. There's none of that. Okay, so the exam is a traditional AP exam, just there's a paper version and then there's a digital version. Okay, so I hope that answers some of your questions, and of course your teacher will know, you know, your school's official test date. So one of the things I wanted us to be able to talk about was to really kind of think about what's necessary to earn the thesis point. And we'll look at a couple sample thesis statements that earn the point versus those that don't. And general differences between convincing versus unconvincing evidence, and connecting a longer work to universal meaning and forming interpretation. So this is, again, just an overview, and more detail obviously will come in those, you know, those later sessions today. All right, so where do the points come from? You know, your thesis is worth, you know, 0 to 1 point. All right, so that's your first point. If you have trouble getting the thesis point, I'm going to kind of, I think, try to make this so. Can you all still see the presentation if I do it that way? Because I hate not being able to.
Yes.
Yes, because I hate not being able to see, you know, the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of driving me a little bit. Okay. And I can see more. You want to identify the needed elements for your essay faster. You want to get better at poetry. Being consistent. I wanted to learn to focus only on the important parts of my analysis and how to organize my thoughts. I don't know if I'll be able to answer all of those things, but I will do my best. Mary, when you said you want to focus on getting the points that you keep missing, you know, you could kind of let me know maybe what that is. Okay, so you can still see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right. Yay. Okay. All right. So I apologize for ever. I use Google Meet. So I feel really discombobulated where everything is. All right. Okay. So I feel better. So the thesis, of course, is the 0 to 1 point, and then the evidence and commentary are 0 to 4 points. And your sophistication point is 1 point. Most students struggle, I think, here in the evidence and the commentary. So we'll try to talk about that. And interrupt me at any point when you have questions. Okay. All right. So your thesis point, you know, question 1 is where you respond to the prompt with a thesis that presents a defensible interpretation of the poem. So I want you to notice here is the only thing that's different in terms of the thesis point is one word, really. No matter if you're writing about poetry, no matter if you're writing about a prose passage, it doesn't matter. You still have to have a defensible interpretation. So if you miss that from the beginning, that is going to cause a problem. Has anyone been missing the thesis point? And you can just type, or you can raise your hand too. But who's been missing the thesis point? Nobody. Okay, that's good. All right, that's real good. Okay, all right. So we'll kind of maybe go through this a little bit faster. You know, if you aren't earning the thesis point, usually it's because we're only restating the prompt. We're only giving a summary of the issue with no apparent coherent claim. So the biggest issue is restating the prompt. All right. So you go ahead and tell me. So here is a sample thesis. Okay. It's related to the poetry prompt. So you can kind of read that. So the speaker reflects on the process of growing older. Analyze how Emerson uses, okay, typo there, poetic elements and techniques to convey the speaker's complex perspective on aging. All right, so when you look at this thesis, do you think that this thesis earned the point or no point? What do you think? Okay, I'm seeing lots of no's. All right, which is awesome. No point. Who can say why? What's wrong with it? They didn't say what was complex, okay? It doesn't make a claim. It's basically an attention grabber, all right? So yeah, like this would be a starter, okay? But this isn't this isn't a thesis. It's a statement of fact. It's an observation about the poem. It does not explain what the speaker's complex perspective on aging is, all right? So good job. All right, awesome. Okay, your teacher should be proud of you. Okay, all right, so let's take a look at this next one. So same prompt. Okay, hopefully you can see these. All right, so which of these do you think would receive the point? The one on the left or the one on the right? Second one. Okay. they're right. Okay, and not just because it's longer, correct? What does the one on the left do or not do? Okay, yes, it restates the prompt. All right, okay. So again, how many of you say the thesis is, you're good on the thesis? Okay. All right. Now, I think what a lot of you might be wanting is more explanation of how to use evidence and commentary. And I don't know if I can give that to you today with kind of what I prepared, but I will do my best with it. Okay. So let's go ahead and so I don't think we need to look at any more thesis statements. What do you all think? Are you good on the thesis? Yes. Yes, 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 yes. All right. Okay. All right. So, all right. Okay. All right. So let's talk about evidence and commentary. All right. Okay. So tell me a little bit more about kind of what sort of feedback you've been getting in regards to the second row, in regards to evidence and commentary. I didn't pull any samples from evidence and commentary because I knew that the second session is going to work more on this topic. So I will do my best to address for you what I can, right? Too much plot summary. Okay. Same. Okay. All right. Being specific, go back to the line of reasoning. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Tina. Okay. I usually tend to focus on the theme for one paragraph and then stray a bit. Okay. So are we mostly getting ones or twos? Twos. Two. Okay. So lots of twos. All right. Okay. And again, kind of try to keep in mind, I know Matt is doing something on evidence and commentary next. So I'll try to address your questions. That's a lot of twos. And I'm not surprised. It's hard to go from a 2 to a 3. All right. So, and that's why this is bolded. And I have a question. I have to ask somebody a question one time. Nancy, is everything okay outside? Mm-hmm. Okay. We're having a yard sale too. Because it's not raining today. Okay, Chris, you got a gosh darn 1. All right. Did you get any feedback, Chris, on that 1 other than just a 1? All right. Okay. So all right. So evidence and commentary, a 0 is not the case. We know that's restating the thesis, but look at the 2. All right. So for evidence, a 2 will typically provide some specific relevant evidence. All right. And the commentary explains how some of the evidence relates to the student's argument, but no line of reasoning is established or the line of reasoning is faulty. And then to get to that 3, you have to have specific evidence to support all of your claims. And I want you to maybe note that, okay? A 2 is partial. A 3 is complete. And the commentary is going to explain how some of the evidence supports a line of reasoning. So a 3 gives evidence for every claim. It may not explain all the evidence equally well, okay? But if you made a claim that sound in the poem contributes to a certain effect, you gave proof for it, all right? Now, a 3 also explains how at least one literary element contributes to the meaning. So if you talk about setting, and so I want you to think about your own essays, is if you are talking about the setting, you're describing the setting, you are saying the setting is important in this prose passage, are you saying why the setting matters to the meaning of the text? So when you say you're getting lots of 2s, is that on all of your responses or just on one type of response? Is that just on the poetry? Is that on the prose? Is that on the novel? Okay, prose is not your strong point. All right. And the more you can communicate with me, I think more kind of I can talk to you individually directly. I see some of you sending me direct messages, which is fantastic. Thank you. You know, one of you commented that your scoring isn't consistent. Maybe you got a 2 on evidence and commentary in one type of essay or one type of piece, and then you got a 3 on another. That's not necessarily a reflection of you as a writer. That's sometimes a reflection of the type of text that you're dealing with. Okay, I'm trying to read. Okay, 2 on everything, lots of direct message. Okay, someone asked about the evidence that you use for the novel. We'll talk about that type of evidence in a few minutes. Okay. All right. Ask me questions as we go. If I'm not addressing something that you want me to try to talk about, please ask me. Okay. All right, so if your goal is to earn a 3 here, all right, so how do you do that? And this is a very simplistic description of how you can get a 3, you know, generally without seeing your specific essay. And again, you know, Matt will go into more detail. All right, so an essay that gets a 3, your evidence is going to be very, very specific. All right, so by that I mean that you might refer to a sentence or a line from the text. So think about how you use evidence, okay? But then often a 3, the writer will say, in this line, the word X does something a little bit more. All right, so I want you to think about how you use evidence. Do you use evidence in that way? So often a 2, again, might say something like, you know, they give the whole line and then they try to explain how it's relevant. But a 3 will pull like a word or a specific detail out of that line and do a little bit further with it. So which one do you think you tend to be? The one who uses the whole line or the one who pulls details out of the line and deals with them separately? Okay, all right, great. Okay, so you're pulling details. Awesome. Okay. Okay, all right. The whole, you know, someone just mentioned the whole line normally. All right, so what you want to do, and I hope you're making notes on this. You can, you know, I could send you this if you wanted me to. On your next essay, or even take an essay that you've already written, okay, and look at a paragraph or look at a section where you give an example and you reference the entire line. The next sentence, go in and write something like, within this line, the author's choice of the word X or whatever, and try to pull something out and see, ask your teacher, see if that makes a difference in the overall performance of your piece. All right, so get some feedback on that and see if that makes a difference. Okay, so we're going to move on to this next bullet. So the writer makes more than one claim to support the thesis. You can't just claim, for example, in prose, that the setting does this one job, okay? And that's how it contributes to the meaning. That's only one claim. You have to make more than one claim. Sometimes we might be only making one claim because we have a problem with time management, but you have to make more than one claim. It's not about the length of your piece. You can write 3 pages, but if you only make one claim, you're not going to get up to a 3 because you're not really creating a line of reasoning. You're not really making an argument. So the third bullet is that you give evidence for every claim that you make. How do we think we're doing on that bullet? Are we giving evidence for everything we claim? So if you claim the sound in the poem, or if you claim that the figurative language of the poem is important, if you even mention it, you have to give evidence for it. So think about, are you making claims that you're not developing? Fourth bullet, you have to thoroughly explain your evidence. So again, I want you to think about your essays. Now, I'm going to talk about essay 3 separately, all right? So think about poetry and prose. When you explain your evidence, are you typically writing 1 sentence or 2 to 3 sentences to explain your evidence? Okay, 2 to 3, good. 2 to 3, 2 to 3, 2 to 3. Okay, now one thing, okay, all right. Okay, all right, so most of you are saying 2 to 3. A couple of you said 1, okay. All right, so there's a potential problem here. If this is your weak spot, how many of you have been told that it's your explanations that are your weakness? Yes, 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 yes. All right. Okay. This is potentially the problem. And again, it's hard to, I feel like I'm a doctor trying to diagnose you through like a Zoom health call or something. I want to see your essays. I want to have your essays in my hands and be able to sit and talk with you and sit with you side by side. How nice would that be? There's a possibility of a couple things. One, if you're writing 2 to 3 sentences, what you have to make sure of is that you're not just maybe restating, okay, in your explanations. So you could be writing 2 to 3 sentences of an explanation, but you might be paraphrasing. You might be, restating. Okay. Maria, what was the issue? You said that, are you restating? Yes. Okay. All right. So those are potential issues. All right. So if you're doing 2 to 3 sentences, but maybe you're still being told you're not explaining enough, you might be restating. Okay. Chris, by restating, and this is something Matt will probably talk about, Mr. Cantrell, is that when you restate, you you might try something like, you say that a simile is important, and then you just say again, you might just repeat what the simile is comparing. So you may explain the simile. You may say what two things are being compared in the simile, but you don't go further and explain why the comparison matters to meaning. Now, if you're only doing one sentence to follow through a piece of evidence, you're welcome, Chris. There's a good chance that you're also maybe just restating or summarizing. All right. So try to take it a little bit further and explain. Okay. Last bullet here. You have to refer to at least one literary element or technique. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to know what, if you're writing about poetry and you notice, repetition of beginning phrases or something, you don't have to call it anaphora. Like, you don't have to call something alliteration to talk about it. You can just say what it is, but you have to explain how the evidence contributes to the meaning. You can't just say it contributes to the meaning. You can't just tell me it contributes to the meaning. You have to explain how it does that. And for a lot of students, I think that's the hard part. All right. How do you, because several of you said that you were, that it was your connection to meaning, I think. You have to be able to say, this piece of evidence does this, and it contributes to the meaning because it is building on this earlier idea, or it continues this imagery that continues to develop and emphasize maybe the speaker's anger. All right. So, I wish I could show you video. I'm sorry, I'm out in the country, and I'm on a Chromebook, and my signal's not the strongest, so I apologize. But what you're trying to create is like a chain of evidence. All right. So again, kind of maybe give me a little feedback and tell me, how you're doing with this. But when you give evidence, you want to create links between all of your evidence. So your evidence is like a chain. So the first piece of evidence is connected to the next piece of evidence, and then the next piece of evidence, and they all build up and go together to create one overall feeling. So nothing is separate. Everything has to connect together. So kind of give me a little feedback and tell me how you think you do creating those connections between the ideas and between the evidence and commentary. Okay, good, Mary. And again, and it's difficult, and I'm probably telling you some things that your teachers have told you. You're just like my students. Sometimes I tell students something and their teacher's like, I've been telling them that the whole time. But it's different, when someone you don't know. Okay. You feel like you can create a segue to connect them, but you put needed information. I feel like the evidence for me connects to the general. I haven't planned well enough. Okay. And I will say a little bit about planning. My students haven't practiced near enough on their essays yet this year. And simply because, I'm sure you're like my own kids. they haven't been in class a whole lot in person. You know, my kids, I just went, we came back to 4 days a week. You know, so I have my kids 4 days a week now, the ones who are in person. But we've only been that way 2 weeks. And, you know, I really didn't, I had them writing some essays when they were virtual, but not near enough. And, you know, getting that time to complete some of the things I'm talking about, take your teacher, ask your teacher, you know, make a change on an essay that you've done and you know that you've gotten back, and then ask, you know, what kind of difference do you think this makes in piece? Lots of times you only have to practice with one paragraph to practice those skills. You have 40 minutes per essay. I really do recommend that you take the first 15 minutes of that time to read and plan, okay? Because your essay doesn't have to be lengthy. I've read very well-written, very well-developed and highly analytical essays that are 1.5 pages long and 2 pages. You do not have to write, you know, 3-4 pages. All right. It's what you say, not how much you say. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's kind of take another little look here. All right. So, okay. So in general, and I know I haven't talked about question 3 yet. I'm getting ready to. And then we can kind of address some more general things that you all might have questions about. So weaker responses, okay, not bad responses, the essays that most score maybe a 1 or 2s. You know, if you're focusing, if you're getting a 1, you might be giving your opinion about the text. You might be giving your opinion about the quality of the piece, or you may be giving your opinion on the feeling or the characters. You may be summarizing it or retelling the poem or passage. You may also just be listing details that you think are important, or you're just listing techniques. All right, so those tend to be hallmarks of ones, that they tell things that are important in the piece. They maybe even do quote, but they're just saying these things are important and not doing anything further with it. So when you start moving more into the 2 and you're trying to make that jump to the 3, these lower 3 bullets are kind of where I think things come into play. You may refer to lines or phrases, but not get specific. We've already talked about that. Some of you said that you felt that was a problem. The writer may not explain how these elements contribute to a purpose. All right. So everything is used purposefully. So that's what you have to try to articulate in your essay. What job is this piece of evidence doing? Like, what does it matter? And sometimes students are inaccurate. All right. You know, they have a misread. So please, you know, if you start writing hastily, you read the text one time and then you're writing, there's a good chance that you're making some inaccurate statements. Your teacher may have pointed them out or may not. They may be calling it like an error in logic, right? But if you start reading a text and you get a little confused, you know, about a paragraph in or about 10 lines in, you need to stop and you need to go back and reread and make sure that you understand what is happening, that you can summarize the poem, you can summarize the prose passage, you can take someone else through. If someone said to, you know, Julianne, you know, if you were in my class and we were reading a prose passage, and I said, okay, so what happens at the beginning of the text? Where are we? What is happening? Who are these people? What are they doing? And then we move to the next paragraph. Okay, well, what's happening now? And you can go through, you should be able to go through text from the beginning of it to the end of it, okay, and explain what's happening. Okay, so how do y'all feel about that issue? What can we do if we can't figure out what the theme of the poetry is? Okay, we are going to talk about general kind of universal themes in just a couple of minutes. Okay, and my question to you, if you say, oh, that's okay, Ella, people are coming in. If you can't figure out what the theme is, you just decide what you think the theme is. Okay, you just make a jump, because who's going to tell you you're wrong? Who's going to tell you you're wrong? I had this conversation. This is my booster. Okay. And this is why it's, I think, helpful to have people who are in the classroom talking to you. My students did a test over poetry on Wednesday. And they were reading Blackberry Picking by Seamus Heaney, which was my favorite poems. And whenever I pick up my students' papers, I always look at their essays to kind of just see if they need a second opportunity to maybe make some quick changes before they submit it. And she had written, I don't really know what. And I stopped there and went back to her desk and pointed to that line and said, no, 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 no. Okay. You have to make a decision about what you think the text means. And you argue it like you know you're right. And my job as a reader is to judge whether or not you did an effective job of keeping up. That makes sense. That's your job. That's my job. So do not worry that you can't figure it out, because this is teacher me. When I first read it, there's, how many of y'all have books that you've read multiple times? Yes. Okay. So why do you still read them? You already know what happens. So why do you read it again? You know, it's new things. Okay. The fact and the feeling. Okay. I still, as an adult, read The Language in Wardrobe. I have read that book 2 to 3 times a year since I was 8. Okay. That's been a long time. Okay. I have read The Lord of the Flies probably 30 times. Every time I read a book, I'm never reading the same book. All right. Every time I read it, I see something new in it. And that's my belief. No one's going to tell me that when I read The Language in the Wardrobe, that no one is going to tell me that's not what it's about, because I decided that at that point it is what it's about. So do not doubt yourself. Now, and I think it's easier to do that on the exam. Okay. Because when you do the exam, are you going to get your essay back? You want to get your essay back on the AP exam? Nope. Okay. And it's different, you know, and I know that we worry. Are there any teachers in the group? No, I'm just curious. Okay. You know, my students worry that they're going to say something. Yeah, hi, Dakota. They worry that somehow they're going to like challenge my thinking, or they worry that they have to figure out what I think. And I'm glad they hear what I think, but that's not what writing, that's not what analysis, and that's not what interpreting is about. That's why I love English. That's why I love reading. That's also why I have some kids who love math. Okay. Trust yourself. And that's all I can say about that. You just gotta do it. Okay. All right. So the soapbox and yes, Dakota. Okay. And it's not like I tell my students, you know, and I told them this one story. I'll tell you all this really funny story. Now, there are some interpretations that are going to be inaccurate. Okay. Do y'all know the poem Blackberry Picking? Do y'all know the poem Blackberry Picking? Oh, it's beautiful.
Well, sorry, Susan. We're actually reading it on Monday. So if we don't give everything away, that'd be cool.
Okay, I'm not going to give anything away, but I'll tell you this really funny thing. Is that one year I had a student who, I pick blackberries every year. You know, I mean, I can blackberries, and my hands come back. I'm all scratched up, and but one time I had a student. He said, "I think it's about vampires," and I said, "No, it's not." He said, "It could be," and I said, "No, it's not." Okay, and I tell my students, I said, "No, it's not going to be about vampires, but you could probably argue just about anything else. But if you argue, what do you have to be able to provide? You have to be able to provide the evidence to, you know, to back it up. And I don't care. There's no evidence to support that Seamus Haney's talking about vampires and blackberry picking. So you kids think about when you read that poem on Monday." All right. Really. Let's see here. Okay. So question 3. Some of you have already pointed out that the evidence here. You know, weak responses, tentative. I'm sorry, Mary. I can't do anything about the audio. It might be because if there are other people who might start to leave the other breakout room. So I'll try to wrap up real quickly. I mean, I can send this to you if you need to, or you can ask me any questions if you need me to, if you need to also, Mary. Okay. You know, often we don't explain the progressions, but I think that bottom idea is probably the one that many of you were expressing, is that stronger pieces refer to specific scenes in specific moments and how those elements build on each other to a final point. So someone said, you can't really use quotes when you write about a novel. I beg to differ. Okay. So, you know, your teachers will probably tell you the same thing. Someone else might mention it later today. I highly recommend that you have a list of 3 books, 3 texts that you know exceptionally well, that you can pull memorable quotes from, that you do want to maybe incorporate in your text. But I'm not going to double check your quote to make sure it's accurate, but there are certain texts, we just remember certain themes. We remember certain scenes. So like in Lord of the Flies, who's read Lord of the Flies? Anybody read Lord of the Flies? Okay, all right. Yes. Okay, so I remember a specific scene when Jack wants to make lots of rules, and he says, we'll make rules, we'll make lots of rules, because we're the British, and the British are the best at everything. I don't remember exactly Jack's words, but it's enough I could probably quote it as evidence if I wanted to. I later remember Jack says bollocks to the rules. You know, we don't need the rules. Again, that may not be verbatim, but it's close enough that I could use that as supporting evidence I need to do. Okay, so you need to go ahead and pick, you know, a text. One of my students one year, he used not 451 for every essay that we did in class. Could the evidence be a scene we remember very well? Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah, your evidence can be a scene you remember exceptionally well, and you detail that. Okay, so Tina said the other sessions ended, so we need to wrap up. If you have any questions about anything, please let me know. I hope that we kind of went over this. I will, your teachers can ask me for this. It's a little link just to some universal themes. just to kind of refresh your memory. I'm sure your teacher has accessed that. But if y'all need anything, I'm going to you all let me know. And it was a nice chat. Okay, I probably could have abandoned most of my PowerPoint, but that's okay. All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Tina. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, can everyone see my the PowerPoint? Now, I'm really encouraged from listening to the beginning of Ryan's when he asked people to turn their cameras on and feel free to unmute and talk. So I'm going to do that also. It would make me really happy if you showed yourself. And my ideal kind of session would be one where, you know, I'm talking and you're talking in the chat box and you're even unmuting to interrupt and ask questions. That would be great. I don't want this to be sort of a one-sided, you know, experience. So my name is Matt Cantrell, and I'm going to focus today on probably the number one problem we have in AP Lit, which is just people summarizing their essays. Before I begin, just to sort of get us in the mood of, get us in the habit of talking and communicating in the chat, I would like for everyone to put in the chat what a stereotype or a cliche about English teachers and about the way we study literature at the high school level. I want to begin by talking about all the cliches and stereotypes that we associate with, you know, English class in high school and studying poetry and novels. So if you would, I'd like for you very quickly just to jot down a stereotype that comes to mind about how we study literature in high school classrooms. Is no one aware of the cliches and the stereotypes of the high school English classroom? Okay. Hang on just a second. I'm sorry. I've got people messaging me saying they need to go to a different classroom now. Ryan, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
John Huff says that his teacher needs him to go to the advanced room.
All right, John, moving you there now, brother.
Okay, Samantha Dotson, the curtains being blue represents the character's inner turmoil. Everything is a metaphor. Yeah. I've collected this, you know, there's a meme for everything. I've tried to collect a series of memes about, you know, how people make fun of English teachers, that we overanalyze everything, that we look for meaning and symbolism where there isn't meaning and symbolism. But what I'm going to talk about today is why everyone's actually wrong, and then English teachers probably do this less than the general population. And then in fact, you as a teenager, or even the teachers here, you probably overanalyze more than an English teacher does. So let me begin. So here we have a mask. So literally, if I tried to summarize what this is, what is this? Well, it's a mask. It is you know, something that goes over your face. What if I asked you to say what this mask means? And I'd like for you to try this in the comment section. Not necessarily to you, but think about all the meaning that people associate with this little piece of fabric. And over the last year and a half, I'm sure you've come across many people who they associate different meanings with this fabric. Let's see. So we've got safety, isolation, prevention, sickness. It means COVID. Let me scroll up and keep up here. Safety, health, protection. Okay, so these are mostly positive associations. What about negative meanings? What are some negative meanings that people attribute to the mask? Restriction, right. So this is what I'm talking about. What we do in English is not control. That's a good loss of comfort. Yeah, stay away. So what we do in AP Lit, what we do in English, what we do in literary studies is not different from what we do in our everyday life. Here we have this thing. We all agree what it literally means. And yet, when you start asking the public what this means, you're going to get a lot of different meanings. So like over here on the left, you see this, the cartoon, the mask represents patriotism. It's about making yourself uncomfortable for the good of everyone else, for the good of the country. On the right over here, someone said control. You see this woman, an anti-masker, who says this is a mind control device. We go to these next one, you'll see, look at these people talking about symbol. I bet these people hated their English teachers in high school because they thought their English teacher made them talk about symbols too much. But look at it. It's a symbol of tyranny over down here. Tyranny and oppression, choice. Down here, this one, it's kind of unstated, but this one's about conformity, And up here we get, this is unstated also. I would probably put like sacrifice. Okay, so what we're doing, what these cartoons do and what we do in our everyday life is that we look at this mask and we attribute meaning to it, meaning that is not necessarily there. I mean, literally, this is just a mask. However, we are making it mean something else. What about, okay, this might be, I'm a little old for this, but you students can help us here. What does it mean literally to be left on red? When students say they're left on red, what does that mean? Just literally, what's happened? They read your text and they didn't respond, right? Okay, now, what kind of meaning do we typically associate with being left on red? You've been ignored, right? You think it means they don't want to talk to you, fake, right. See, you're all little literary critics in the making. Like you do this all the time. Here we have more memes. When you get left on red, it makes you feel anxiety, shame, self-loathing. Mostly it's negative about yourself, right? You feel like a loser. You hyperventilate, you can't breathe because you're so nervous, right? Literally, someone has read your message and not responded. But in terms of meaning, we attribute to that, these harmful, negative meanings. What about, before I click to the next one, and this is something as a 38-year-old I wasn't aware of, but I keep reading articles about how teenagers don't like to use punctuation in messages. Can anybody comment on that? Like, what does a period at the end of a sentence in a text message mean to teenagers? Maybe this isn't universal, and this is the first time you're mad or annoyance. It means you're angry, right? So literally, we have a period at the end of a sentence, right? That's all it is. It is a period. But what does that period mean? Well, let's go through all this. It says they're less sincere, okay, or it's intimidating because they're being aggressive. Teens don't end text with periods because it has meanings associated with it, unless they're trying to make you feel that way. Maybe they're trying to intimidate you, so they put that period there. But in all these situations, you're doing with I want to talk to you, it's scary, period. It's scarier, right? I'm the exact opposite. Like, if there's no period, I get worried because I feel like my wife is probably so mad she's not even bothering to hit the space bar twice. But that's probably just an age thing. So in these cases, we have these things that we can all agree on what they are. Literally, we can summarize them, but we disagree about the meaning of them. And that's really what I want to talk about, because what you do with these periods, or with things like being left on red or face mask, it's what we do. It's what we are supposed to do with literature also. Now, in all of these cases, what all these have in common is, what you said, they're these meaning words, okay? Now, I'm going to give you this. I didn't come up with this. The person who sort of taught me to teach AP Lit gave me this, and this is not like a full list. It's just a list of meaning words that you can pull from. But what we do in AP Lit is we look at a poem, we talk about what's literally going on, and then we try to figure out what it means, okay? Just like we do in everyday life. It's not unique. It doesn't take place in a separate universe from our real life, our real lives. We are just learning how to do it in a certain way with a certain, disciplinary text. Here's why this is important. If you were in Mr. Hale's session last period, you know he went over this in great detail. As you get through the rubric, you'll get into this part right here between the 2 and the 3. And you know there are lots of differences here, but the one we're going to focus on is this word. When you get into the 3 and the 4 in row B, we're dealing with meaning. When you get into the 1s and 2s, we tend to talk about, you know, over here we're talking about summary. And over here we're kind of talking about summary also. So I want to talk about today how to get from over here to over here. Now let's try this. Now this is just 3 lines from the Billy Collins poem on Turning 10 that you wrote your mock about. So we look at a face mask and we say it means government oppression, or it means sacrifice and patriotism. You look at being left on red and you think it means you're not worthy or you're not good enough. Okay, let's look at this part of a sentence, and I want to try to figure out what meanings we can associate with it. It's the part where this kid's turning 10 and he says, and my bicycle never leaned against the garage as it does today. All the dark blue speed drained out of it. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to share a file with you. Actually, let me see if I can. I don't think I can at the moment. I was going to share the meaning document, but I think I have to do it on the regular chat. It's okay. I'll flip back and forth. And my bicycle never leaned against the garage as it does today. All the dark blue speed drained out of it. Now, what I'd like for you to do in the comment, I want you to, or over here in the chat box, I'd like you to try to come up with just pick 1 or 2 of these words that you think can fit this part of this poem, where he looks at his bike and all the dark blue speed appears drained out of it. What words from this list can we associate with that line? And there's not there's not like 1 right answer or 10 right answers. I can think of a lot that I can put there. Loss, that's a great one. Doubt, failure. Memories, okay. This is great because we have this line. We can all put our fingers on this line and we can say what's literally going on. He's looking at his bike and it looks like it's not as fast as it used to be. But what does it mean to him? You're saying, well, maturate, and these all are kind of connected. He's maturing and he's changing and he's thinking about the memories. And in a way, he's thinking about, you know, the loss of what that felt like when he was little. We have to talk about meaning at all times when you're writing these essays, okay? This is great. Growth, yeah, this is perfect. This is perfect. You have to, you know, kind of acquaint yourself and get used to the fact that if you're writing a sentence on these essays that is not quoting the text, it needs to deal with meaning in some way, as much as possible. Let me go back. Here's my secret motto for literary studies and AP Lit, okay? What can I make this text mean? Not what does it mean. It doesn't matter we're not worried about what does it mean. What do you think it means? This is a line from a guy named Harold Bloom, who was a really famous literary critic. He said, "What can I make this text mean?" Because in AP Lit, there's not 1 right answer. There aren't 10 right answers. You're trying to come up with an interpretation of your poem or your prose or your novel, and then, like Mr. Hale said, you're trying to defend that interpretation. Okay. What can I make this text mean? And sometimes I like to give my kids, we'll look at a poem and I'll pick some of these out that don't immediately seem like they fit, and they have to try to make it fit. How does power, if I wanted to make them talk about that bike losing its speed, I might make them talk about power, or I might make them talk about, solitude or something like that. But you have to always associate what you're talking about with these meaning words. Let me move on. I'm going to talk a lot about thesis statements, even though this is a session on summarizing. And the reason is because I'm going to try to show you that you are most likely writing thesis statements that actually prevent you from analyzing the text and getting a 3 or 4. Even if you leave here today thinking, I understand how to take the text, how to analyze its parts, how to talk about how they support a thesis statement. If your thesis statement is not written in a certain way, it doesn't matter. Most of us are writing summative thesis statements or descriptive thesis statements that talk about the poem. Let me give you an example. So here's on turning 10 again. Do we need to reread this out loud once to refresh everyone on it? Let me know in the chat box. Will somebody unmute and read for me, like you did for Mr. Hale? Or like they did for Mr. Hale. I don't know if you all were in there, but someone who doesn't care to unmute and read on turning 10 for us.
I can.
Thank you, Samantha.
The whole idea of it makes me feel like I'm coming down with something worse than any stomach ache or the headaches I get from reading in bad light. A kind of measles of the spirit, mumps of the psyche, a disfiguring chickenpox of the soul. You tell me it is too early to be looking back, but that it is because you have forgotten the perfect simplicity of being one and the beautiful complexity introduced by two. But I can lie on my bed and remember every digit. At 4, I was an Arabian wizard. I could make myself invisible by drinking a glass of milk a certain way. At 7, I was a soldier. At 9, a prince. But now I am mostly at the window, watching the late afternoon light. Back then it never fell so solemnly against the side of my treehouse, and my bicycle never leaned against the garage as it does today. All the dark blue speed drained out of it. This is the beginning of sadness, I say to myself as I walk through the universe in my sneakers. It is time to say goodbye to my imaginary friends, time to turn the first big number. It seems only yesterday I used to believe there was nothing under my skin but light. If you cut me, I would shine. But now when I fall upon the sidewalks of life, I skin my knees, I bleed.
Thank you, Samantha. That was wonderful. Now, if we look over here at the prompt, just to remind ourselves, we're trying to analyze how Collins uses literary techniques to convey the complexity of the speaker's attitude, okay? So, like I said, our thesis statements have to deal with meaning, and they have to deal with meaning in a certain way, because if you're writing thesis statements that are just describing the poem, you limit yourself, and it's impossible for you to analyze. Let me give you an example. This is a real student essay from the mock. This is part of it anyway. So this student argued that on turning 10, Collins describes the pain of growing up. Now, this kid will get the thesis point. They will get a 1 in row A. But here's the problem. Is there any way to dispute that this speaker feels like growing up is painful? Is that up for debate? It's not, right? I mean, no, oh shoot, I'm so sorry. No one that reads this poem is going, can debate this. This is a summative, descriptive thesis statement. It tells us something that goes on in the poem. All right, the speaker at one point says growing up is painful. Now let's look at the evidence. The whole idea of it makes me feel like I'm coming down with something worse than any stomach ache or the headaches I get from reading in bad light. Now, does that support that it's painful, that growing up is painful? It does. Look at the commentary though. This introduces the idea of growing up being painful. Guys, this isn't an analysis. This is like an exemplification essay. They're saying the poet talks about this being painful. For example, here and here. These show how painful it is. This is not an interpretive, defensible essay. This is a summative essay. They're summarizing part of this poem, the pain of growing up. Here's parts where he says it's painful. Let's look at this next one. This is also a sample from the mock. In On Turning 10, our author, Billy Collins, employs nostalgic tone and metaphors to reveal that the speaker wishes he could stay in the past, but realizes he has to grow up and move on with the rest of their life ahead. Now, on the surface, this looks like it might be a complex thesis statement. It has 2 sides. It has this, but this. However, there is no way to debate that this is wrong, okay? If I said, tell me about this poem, 100% of people would say it's about a kid who realizes they're growing up but wishes they could stay in the past. Does that make sense? Like, this is not debatable. It's not an interpretation. There's no meaning involved, even though it says it has words that kind of suggest meaning, like the past and growing up, but still, this is not up for debate. And because of that, look at what happens in their paragraphs down here. First of all, our author employs a nostalgic tone. I mean, that's not bad, to reveal that the speaker wishes he could stay, but realizes they need to grow up by using imagery. Then they come up with a quote. This shows that the speaker's life has changed so much from when they were younger that they wish it could stay the same. Therefore, the speaker wanted to stay young and in the past. This person is coming up with a summary of the poem and then defending that summary. Briefly in the chat box, tell me, does this make sense what I'm saying so far? Like, are you confused by what I'm saying? These students are, and you know, at the reading in June, we will see this a lot. They're describing an aspect of the poem, okay? This is not debatable. Everyone that reads this is going to agree with this. Look at the next paragraph. Secondly, our author shows metaphors to convey that the speaker wishes he could stay but needs to move on by using similes. Do you see how repetitive this is? Because this kid hasn't made some sort of meaning-based interpretive thesis. They've made a summative thesis that isn't up for debate, and so therefore, for the rest of the essay, they can't get, you know, that 3 and 4 point on row B because their thesis statement prohibits it. In lines 1 through 7, the poem says, the whole idea of it makes me feel like I'm coming down with something worse than a stomach ache. This shows that the speaker doesn't like even the thought of getting older. This whole thing is repetitive. Because they start out with a summary, they have to summarize the rest of the time, okay? So I want to show you kind of a better way. And this is row C on the rubric. Now, this gets maybe kind of dangerous because a lot of people don't think you should, you know, row C is something that just should happen naturally. If a student doesn't, you know, if they can't get row C, don't even bring it up, don't teach to it. I'm of a different mind. I think row C really helps us. Row C helps us organize our essays. My students, we obsess over number 1. I don't know why I drew it that terribly. We obsess over point 1. We organize our essays around a tension or a complexity within the poem. We talk about tension a lot. Let me show you how we do it. So tension is, in our textbook that we use, defines tension as the linking together of opposites. And I've got Superman and Bizarro Superman fighting over here because they're opposites, and we've got yin and yang. And then we figure out meaning by trying to figure out what does the text suggest about the relationship between those two opposites, okay? And the trick is when you're reading a poem and you're trying to find the meaning, you're always trying to look for the tension. And the trick is if you can come up with one side, then you've automatically got the other, because the other side is going to be the opposite of the one you can come up with, okay? And when we say opposites here, we mean opposite meaning words, okay? So if you can come up with one meaning word that this poem is about, you can come up with the other, okay? So here's a trick that I learned. Again, this was the person that taught me how to teach AP Lit. They said a good brainstorming method is meaning word plus verb or verb phrase plus meaning word equals theme. Now that's tricky. I'll show you what I mean by that. But first of all, let me go back to this list. And I'd like for you to pick out at least one meaning word that you think of when you think of the whole poem of On Turning 10, and put it in the chat box. What's one meaning word that poem is about? Struggle, maturity, expectation, good. Progress, change. These are all good. Reality, and you can see how these link up. Like Samantha said expectation, Trinity said reality. Those are opposites from each other. Like expectation and reality, that's a tension in this poem. Truth, the opposite of truth is, what is the opposite of truth? I mean, like fiction. Truth and reality kind of line up. What's the opposite of reality? I see. These will all work, is my point. But let me proceed. Here's how I read this poem. And it doesn't mean it's the right way. It just means it's how I read. And if you look over here on the left, you can see I've already prepared other slides to talk about this. I read this as a poem that's about imagination and reality. Okay. Now, imagination plus verb plus meaning word equals theme. So what does imagination do to reality in this poem? Anybody want to take a guess? I'll do it. If alters it, okay. Obscures it. These will work. I'm going to put imagination imagination defends against reality. That's what I wrote down in my notes. Now, at the same time, here's how we know if this is debatable. If this is a good thesis statement, this isn't a thesis statement yet, but it will be soon. But if this is a good thesis, if this is a good interpretation, then the opposite will also be true. Let's flip it around. What does reality do to imagination in this poem? Reality does what to imagination? Imagination defends against reality. I think you can read this poem as reality is terrible. Imagination helps you deal with kind of the oppressive reality that's all around you. I think you can. That's a reading of this poem. So let's flip it around though. What does reality do to imagination in this poem? Breaks through, gets rid of it, fights imagination. I'll go a little further. I'll say reality, destroys imagination. Now, both of these, I think, are possible interpretations about what this kid kind of is beginning to learn as he turns 10 years old, okay? Let me show you what I've done. Now, I've taken these kind of ideas, this brainstorming, I've made 2 thesis statements with 2 possible interpretations. Now, these are 2 of infinite number of interpretations, okay? So the first one's in On Turning 10, Billy Collins explores the tension between reality and imagination and suggests that our imagination acts as a necessary defense against the oppressive, bleak reality we experience every day. Now, this is not something that I think a lot of people would, if I said, what's this poem about? I don't think they would necessarily say this. This is an interpretation, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that if people read this, they might go, I don't know about that. That's fine. That's what my essay is for. My essay is an opportunity for me to say, look, I'm right. This interpretation is right. Now, I put a little smiley face over there because I think this is sort of the happier of the 2. Like, yeah, life kind of sucks, but we use our imagination as sort of a barrier to keep us from just, suffering from total exposure to reality, which we can't do, okay? But maybe I want to flip it around. I want to say in On Turning 10, Billy Collins explores the tension between reality and imagination and suggests that since reality cannot be avoided, we are better off embracing what is real instead of trying to run from it. Now, I've never seen a real good essay that does this and accounts for an alternative interpretation of the poem, but that is one of the ways to get row C, the point in row C. But I think you could, I'm not going to suggest this beyond saying this. It's possible you could write an essay where you say which one of these 2 meanings is really kind of it. Which one is the definitive reading of this poem? But more realistically, we would pick one of these. And then, is this interpretive? Does it deal with meaning? It's got the meaning words, and it tells us what the relationship is between those. Reality can't be avoided, so we're better off embracing what is real instead of trying to run from it. That's a meaning. I have to spend the rest of my essay trying to prove that meaning is correct, okay? How does everyone feel? Give me a really quick, like, okay, or I'm lost, or this is confusing in the chat. Okay. Let's try one together. This is an entire short story. It's a very, very short story. It's called a hint fiction short story. I think it has to be fewer than 25 words. It's called What Didn't Happen by Janet Gardner, and it says, his life did not flash before his eyes, but his mouth filled with the taste perfectly remembered from childhood of lemon buttercream frosting. So initially I had intended to go to Jamboard and let you post on there. Are you all okay just doing it in the chat box? Like I was going, that you would be anonymous on Jamboard and you might be more willing to participate, but you all are doing a good job in with chat box, and we're learning how to do this. This is technically a beginning level kind of exercise, so please don't be afraid of looking silly or saying the wrong thing. I promise, even if you say the wrong thing, it's instructive and helpful. What I'd like for you to do is take a minute, and I want you to come up with like that 3-part thesis statement. So we've got like meaning word plus verb or verb phrase plus meaning word, and that equals theme. So I'd like for you to think about, the meaning words that we talked about. I'm going to stop sharing my screen while you do this, and I'm going to actually send you. When we're in the main room, it gives me the option to share a file, but it doesn't give me the option to share a file with you in a breakout room for some reason. I'm not sure why. Okay. That's okay. So what I'd like for you to do is just to think about, the meaning words, and I want you to try to come up with that 3-part kind of thesis. His life did not flash before his eyes, but his mouth filled with the taste perfectly remembered from childhood of lemon buttercream frosting. So what's the, pick 2 meaning words, figure out kind of the verb that you would use in the middle, and post it in the chat box. There's no wrong answer. I'll give you 60 seconds. I'll read it out loud one more time, then I'll go back to the meaning word list myself. His life did not flash before his eyes, but his mouth filled with the taste perfectly remembered from childhood of lemon buttercream frosting. So it's, if we were summarizing this story, it looks like, right before someone passes, I see, as I start to summarize, I'm starting to use meaning words, and I don't want to do that. His life didn't flash before his eyes, and instead he remembered tasting just this certain kind of frosting as a child. I'll go back up to the meaning word list just as a little bit of help. But what do you think is a possible thesis statement that we could use here? Nostalgia contradicting death. That's cool. What else? Reed has us off and running. And sometimes you really want to, I think my students at the beginning of the year, they kind of reach for the most obvious one, and that's not always a good thing. Nostalgia contradicting death. Like, that's not immediately, that doesn't come into my head right away, but that is something I can see being, that you could defend. Youth versus the inevitable mark of age. All right. What does youth do to age, I guess? Because we kind of think of age as defeating youth, but in this story, it's the opposite. Even though age seems to have defeated youth, kind of roars back at the end. That's a cool idea. Anybody else? Reality overcome by memories. Cool. You're getting it. See, we have to deal with these sort of abstract ideas. Okay, let me show you. Here's what I wrote, just for reference. I said, in What Didn't Happen, Janet Garner explores the tension between the significant and the trivial. Those were my opposites. Things that we think of as, you can also do like expectation and reality. What do we expect to be significant, like our big significant memories? What's the reality? Well, it's the little things, So I picked the significant and the trivial, and suggests that the seemingly meaningless events of our lives turn out to be our most important experiences, and that we should appreciate the boring aspects that we take for granted. Okay, look at how, what I did is I picked out, a meaning, I found its opposite, and I figured out what does this story say is the relationship between these two things. It's sort of an irony. I probably could have put that because we AP readers love when you effectively use irony. The irony here is that what we expect is that when you pass, you remember all these beautiful big moments, and instead the things that seem to matter the most are the little things that you take for granted. This actually turns out to be longer than the story itself, but that's all right. It's a meaning driven thesis statement. Okay, let's spend a little bit of time practicing on a fresh poem. Okay, this is called the Black Walnut, and we'll end hopefully in about 10 minutes. The Black Walnut Tree. It says, carefully read the poem by Mary Oliver, then write a well-organized essay in which you analyze how Oliver conveys the relationship between the tree and family through the use of figurative language and other poetic techniques. So we're looking for the relationship between the tree and the family, okay? Will anyone volunteer to read the Black Walnut Tree for us quickly? Anyone?
I'll read it.
All right. Oh, thanks, Tina.
I like this poem a lot. The Black Walnut Tree. My mother and I debate. We could sell the black walnut tree to the lumberman and pay off the mortgage. Likely some storm anyway will churn down its bark boughs, smashing the house. We talk slowly, two women trying in a difficult time to be wise. Roots in the cellar drains, I say, and she replies that the leaves are getting heavier every year and the fruit harder to gather away. But something brighter than money moves in our blood, an edge sharp and quick as a trowel that wants us to dig and sow. So we talk, but we don't do anything. That night I dream of my fathers out of Bohemia, filling the blue fields of fresh and generous Ohio with leaves and vines and orchards. What my mother and I know is that we'd crawl with shame in the emptiness we'd made in our own and our father's backyard. So the black walnut tree swings through another year of sun and leaping winds, of leaves and bounding fruit, and month after month, the whip crack of the mortgage.
Perfect. Now, let's get the simple question out of the way. If you were to summarize what's going on in this poem, the literal events of the poem, what would you say is going on? Just in the chat box very quickly. What is literally going on in this poem? Two women debate on whether to sell their family walnut tree. That's great. That's perfect, Samantha. That is what's going on. They are debating, should we do this or should we not? So now let me go back for a second and pull up the meaning word list, since I can't share it with you. But I'd like for you to volunteer in the chat box some meaning words. You can put as many as you want that you think work in this poem. You know, I'll start. Like, I think memories work. But there are lots of others. What meanings do you think you can attribute to this poem? All right, Julianne says family. If someone says yours, that's okay. Look at all the others. I mean, we have to deal with a lot of meaning, not just a single meaning word. Temptation, that's cool. Values, what else? Tradition, yeah, I just happened, Trinity, to just look at the word progress, and I thought that would work. And I think tradition and progress kind of go against each other. Doubt, relationships, yeah. Belonging, choices, loyalty, these are all great. So if we were trying to figure out, I don't know, which one do we like the best? Growth, that's good. I think a lot of us are going along with, I'm going to pick tradition, okay? Because I think tradition and growth are actually opposed to each other, Maria. A lot of you know, loyalty, I think, goes with tradition. You know, belonging, I think, goes under tradition. Like, do you see what I mean? Like, a lot of these meaning words, once you start finding meaning throughout the poem, what you'll see is they sort really easily into like the big two main meanings. So yeah, I think this is great. So we could say this is about the difference between tradition. What wins in the end? Tradition or progress? Yeah, tradition, right? So what can we say tradition does to progress? Prevents progress. Well, I would tinker with that a little bit, Trinity and Julianne, because I think that makes it seem like the poem wishes they would sell the tree. Do you think that's what it does? Maybe the poem is judging them for not selling it, and you could do that. I think that could work. You could say this is a poem about refusing to move on from tradition when you should. Like that's a meaning, you see? I tend to think she's kind of siding with them, but that doesn't mean I'm right, and that doesn't mean you're wrong. You could write a good paper about this. So tradition, you know, this is just on my mind because I used it a minute ago. Defends against, or I'm going to use defend against because that makes it sound positive, like it's defending against progress. And what do you think the meaning is? Like, what is the relationship between tradition and progress, you think? But practicality and sin, that's a great one. Yeah, there's a high scoring essay from the samples for this year that takes the position. This is a poem about, you know, the tension between practicality and sentimentality, and that sentimentality is more important than the material things in life. Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's great. We figure out the meaning by looking at, you know, this versus this, and figuring out, you know, what's the relationship here? What's the poet, you know, intend us to take from this? That tradition is more important than progress in some instances, that sentimentality and family is more important than practical everyday needs. Maria, let me catch up here. So the tone of the poem in itself matters too when choosing these words. Right? Absolutely, because the tone tells us kind of what the poet or the speaker feels, you know, about who wins and how they feel about it. Like, you know, if you read this as a poem that celebrates tradition, then I think the tone is kind of celebratory at the end. Okay, it's like kind of congratulating them, like, good job, you held out against the needs of the world. They want you to sell that, but you hang on to it. So yeah, you're going to have to debate and show how the tone kind of goes along with that. If you think this is a poem about tradition, if you think it's a poem about progress, then I think you can read this as sort of a sad tone, like these people are kind of condemning themselves because they're trying to hang on to tradition. And in that case, the tone of the poem is kind of disappointed, or, you know, pity. Let me go to the next slide, because one, we're running out of time, and two, this is a great moment to bring this up. You're going to think that Maria and I scripted this because it goes so well. You have to think about your essay as being what we call the single best interpretation. And the idea behind that is, if you have a good interpretation, it should account for everything, every word, every punctuation mark, every part of that poem, okay? So that means the tone of it, Maria. That means the words, the details, the way it's structured, the syntax. If your interpretation cannot explain why these things are in the poem the way they are, then you don't have a good enough interpretation. And the whole point of your essay is to kind of prove that you have in your mind the single best interpretation by saying, look, you know, I can account for the way this poem is structured. I can account for the language they use. I can account, Maria, for the tone at the end of it. You know, I need to prove this. Is, if we had a longer session, we would spend more time on this. How do I prove that the tone is celebrating their refusal to give in? You know, what words tell us that? So your idea is you have to come up with a meaning-driven interpretation, and then you have to use that space, your essay space, to prove that your interpretation is right. And the way you do that is by going through the poem and basically explaining everything. This is why, you know, my students beginning of the year, they're like, how do we write these long essays? Well, by the end of the year, they realize that when you look at this poem, if your interpretation is good enough, it should be there should be nothing up here that's not marked out. And even the things that you can't really see, like syntax, you know, you have to talk about why the syntax is like this and how it fits this meaning. Okay. Now it's not that that's easy, but it's easier if you have a thesis that is meaning driven and talks about, you know, abstract concepts and the meaning of the text. Again, if you have a summative thesis statement, you can't do this, because all you're going to be doing is proving that you summarized the poem correctly in your air quotes thesis statements. Okay, so, and this is the last slide. Let me back up a second and show you what that looks like. So let's say I was going to write an essay on the Billy Collins poem on Turning 10. Let's say I pick the thesis statement. It explores the tension between reality and imagination and suggests that since reality cannot be avoided, we are better off embracing what is real instead of trying to run from it. Now, I picked one part of this poem that I think proves that we're better off embracing reality. It's the part where he says, when he was younger, he believed there was nothing under his skin but light, but now he knows that if he falls, if he skins his knees, he would bleed. How does that prove that? I sketched this out. I said, this illustrates how reality helps to, now look at what I'm doing here. I'm using meaning words within my essay about bigger meaning words. Reality protects us. It helps us survive by showing us our own limitations and our own fragility. A person who lives in a fantasy and is unaware of how vulnerable they are, someone who thinks light instead of blood runs under their skin, puts themselves in danger. I didn't mean Mark. The realization that you bleed might be disappointing, but it helps protect you in the long run. Now, that's me trying to support my interpretation. I'm saying this is a poem about how this boy is realizing that imagination needs to kind of drift away. Does that make sense? And so then I go through and I find evidence and I try to explain, you know, what about this evidence makes me think that. And as I'm doing that, guys, you have to always talk about meaning words. because you don't just want to keep saying reality, imagination, reality, or imagination. What does reality do? Well, in this part, I think it protects us. It helps us survive. It shows us how fragile we are. Does that make sense? That's a really important part. And if we had a longer session, we would talk about this part. But the idea of it is, I'm a lifelong golfer, and I was a golf coach. And when you were trying to teach people to play golf in the beginning, it's not very fun, but you have to teach them the right setup, because if you let them set up however they want, it invites millions of problems. But if you set them up correctly, if I get you writing a good meaning-driven thesis statement, it eliminates a lot of potential problems. It doesn't mean you're going to make a perfect swing, but it means you're going to not make a lot of errors that you might otherwise make. Okay, so that's why I focus a lot on thesis statements in this session. If we can get you making a meaning-driven thesis statement, it sets you up to get into the 3 and the 4 in the B range. And maybe, in terms of row C, I'm not going to tell you to try to shoot for row C, but I teach my kids to organize their essays around row C. Do you see how this paragraph goes back and forth between the red and the blue? I mean, that's what you have to do to get that tension point in row C. You have to structure your essay around that tension and how that tension kind of interacts with each other. Okay. Now it's 11:52. Does anybody have what questions or comments or things you need clarified in these last few minutes before we go back? I wish I would have saved a little bit more time, but do you need anything clarified, or do you have any other questions?
I had one last question.
Okay.
So for like how you said the meaning words, like if we present like the contradicting ideas, but both of them are kind of part of the work, is that something that can set up our essay to make it more complex?
Absolutely, because when we talk about tension, tension is complexity. Okay.
Yeah.
I maybe should have spelled that out more. The rubric uses them interchangeably, but tension is complexity. Okay. So if you're talking about how these two concepts are kind of always battling and pulling each other, and how that affects everything, yeah, that's the complexity point. That's the meaning point. That's the tension point. Okay.
Okay. That's really helpful. Thank you.
What other questions do you have? Are we good? Was that helpful? Like, I don't want you to leave here more confused. Has this been beneficial? Like, I don't know. If I need to clarify something, I will. Okay. Just remember, you always want to deal with, you're always dealing with meaning. We do this all the time. And but for whatever reason, when you give a student a poem, they get very literal, whereas they are, kind of analytical in every other aspect of their life, not just teens, but all people are. You always need to, I'm sure your teacher talks about universal ideas and abstract ideas. It really helps to be familiar with those and to try to make the text fit those. What about this bike makes me think of a loss of freedom? What about, just being able to associate meaning words with the literal parts of the text, and then explaining why it makes you think that, Okay, well, that was all I had this session. I hope it was helpful. Thanks, Cherie. So I don't guess we have to do anything, correct, Tina? We just wait for everyone else to come back? You're muted.
All right. Hi, everybody. Some of you I haven't got to work with yet, so I'm excited. How's the day going for you? I'm going to tell you that this is going to be a pretty interactive session. And so I'm going to ask you if you're comfortable to turn your cameras on. Good. Okay, good. Okay. All right, good. Lots of good feedback there. If you're comfortable, turn your camera on. I know it's a big ask on a Saturday at noon when you've worked all week, and right? And so I'm going to leave it up to you, but it's going to go better if I can see you and we can interact. I'm certainly going to have you unmute and talk to me some. So at the very least, be prepared to do that. Oh, good. Good to hear everybody's having a good day so far. What I want to do today is I want to help you with poetry. What I know is that poetry is going to be about 40 to 45% of this AP exam. And poetry is tricky to some people. When I ask my students to describe where they go wrong with poetry or why they don't like poetry, tricky is the word that comes up the most with them. Somebody tell me, first of all, you might love poetry. And if you do, that's great. And you're also in the right place. But if you struggle with poetry, then you're also in the right place. What I want you to do is head to the chat and tell me what for you about poetry is hard, is tough, is problematic. Or if you're a pro at poetry, then maybe tell me what you love about it. So I'm looking just really for your feelings on poetry. What you love, what frustrates you, what you find problematic. Sometimes it's hard to understand what's happening. Absolutely. The language, yeah, that language can be tough. Multiple meanings. There are multiple meanings, right? And so we got to figure out which one we're going to go with. I struggle with Anna. Yeah, me too. Yeah, all these are things that I have also felt. Writing about it is tricky. Writing poetry is tricky. Yeah, these are good thoughts, you all. Oh, absolutely. The deeper meaning. Sometimes I want to just take a poet and say, just say it. Just whatever you're trying to say, just come out and say it. And I think, okay, you're right where I've been in my life and where many of my students are. Let me ask you this. How many of you have ever read a poem before, and after you read it, you stopped and you said, I have no idea what that was about. I don't have a clue. And I see some hands. Anybody? Yeah. And I hope that doesn't happen to us on the day of the AP exam, either on the multiple choice, because you're going to have 2 or 3 poems on the multiple choice. And then, of course, the poetry essay 1. So what I want to do today is talk about some ways to get something to say, to come up with something to say beyond just maybe what's happening in the poem. What I want to do is I want to show you a couple sample prompts, and I know you've seen some of these before. Will somebody read that first bullet for me? You probably feel the awkwardness that I feel right now when no one says anything. So.
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, that's so nice. Maria, thank you. Yes.
Okay. In Ralph Waldo Emerson's poem Terminus, published in 1867, the speaker reflects on the process of growing older. Read the poem carefully, then in a well-written essay, analyze how Emerson uses literary elements and techniques to convey the speaker's complex perspective on aging.
Thank you so much. I know in all your sessions today, because I've either led them or sat in on them, you've talked about complexity. You've talked about getting to meaning. Remember, we're always going to have the word complex. So there's more than one thing going on. You've got to identify that more than one thing. And then notice here, analyze how Emerson, and Emerson is our poet, is our author, analyze how Emerson uses literary elements and techniques to get to that complexity. What I want to show you also, I want to show you 2 other prompts. This is 2018. Now, prompts have changed a little since then. They're no longer, as you know probably, they're no longer going to give you any literary devices or techniques. But again, I get analyze how the poet portrays the complex relationship. And then I want to show you the year before that, or sorry, the year after that, the landlady, which you might have also seen. Analyze the speaker's complex portrayal of the landlady. Okay? So it's always going to be about some complex something. So we have to figure out a way to get to that complexity. But the other thing I want you to notice is it's about the author. It's about the bits and pieces that the author has included to help us get to that complexity, right? So once I figure out what the complexity is, And the complexity, if you're in on my earlier session, is always going to be more than one thing. So it's this and it's this. This poem is about whatever abstract idea, and then what is the author saying about it? I have to figure out what the complexity is, and then I've got to almost work backward and figure out how I got there. That's one way of doing it. So what were the breadcrumbs that were left along the way to get me beyond just what happens in the poem? What I like to call them in my classroom, yes, they're literary devices. Yes, they're literary techniques, poetic devices, poetic techniques. They're choices, right? What choices has an author made? What has the author chosen to do, to include, to not include, to exclude? What words, what style, what structure, what choices, right? When an author has a poem and says, well, I'm going to have this poem rhyme, or I'm going to have this poem not rhyme. Well, why? Why do you think, and we don't have the luxury of asking that poet on the day of the exam. We have to come up with an answer. And if we can't come up with an answer with that, if I say, well, this poem doesn't rhyme, but I can't really tie that to anything, I don't really know why, then I leave it alone and I say, all right, let me go with something else here. But we're really talking about author's choices. My number one bit of advice for you is use the author's name. Because if you're talking about the author, notice here, analyze how Emerson, the author, uses literary elements and techniques. If all I'm talking about are the people and the characters and the stuff in the poem, then I might be in the world of summary. But if I'm talking about how an author chose to characterize or portray or illustrate something, then more than likely I'm in analysis. So when I'm talking about the author, what bits and pieces, what choices, what moves, what devices has the author used? You might get a poem on the AP exam, and I hope not, but you might get a poem and you might say, I have no idea where to start. I got to tell you, I've been teaching AP Lit for a long time. And like you, teachers go to sessions to get better. They're called professional development. And I went to a session through Advanced Kentucky, through this program you are a part of, back in 2010. Lord, you were 4 or 5 or 6. I mean, you were so little. And it was a guy by the name of Danny Lawrence. And Danny Lawrence is this poetry guru. He's this guy out of North Carolina. And he worked for the College Board, and he did sessions. And he's one of my favorite people ever. And I sat in Louisville on one of his sessions. And these 2 poems I'm going to look at with you today were introduced to me by this poetry guru, Danny Lawrence. He helped write multiple choice questions for the exam. He helped write the poetry prompts. And his advice here that I'm going to, I've modified it. I've changed it over the years. Things have changed. The exam has changed some. But his advice and his strategies that he went over with teachers that day forever changed the way I teach poetry. And I want to share some of that with you today, because when I was thinking about what would help you the most with poetry today and making sure we're not just summarizing, this popped in my mind and I want to share it. So this poem is called Worlds. It's by Richard Wilbur. Richard Wilbur is somebody the AP exam has loved. He's had a couple of poems on the AP exam, one called The Juggler, one called A Barred Owl. I'm going to read this to you. Worlds. For Alexander, there was no Far East, because he thought the Asian continent ended with India. Free Cathay, at least, did not contribute to his discontent. But Newton, who had grasped all space, was more serene. To him it seemed that he'd but played with a few shells and pebbles on the shore of that profundity he had not made. I didn't know what Cathay was. Cathay is like an old way of saying China, like in antiquity. And profundity, I didn't know what that was, but it looks like what word? Does it look like any word that you all know? Profundity? You may want to unmute and take a stab at it. I'll get somebody in the chat. Yeah, profound. So what I want to do is I want to pretend like it's the day of the exam and I get this poem and I don't know where to start. And that is a very common thing amongst some of my students. They get a poem and they don't really know where to start. Well, what I know is that I want to gather some evidence. and then maybe see if I can say something about it. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, Maria, you're on my screen. Maria, can you see the poem over on the left still in the gray box? Yes, okay, good. So what I want to do is I want to look at the poem and I want to say, all right, I want to pull some words out that seem in some way to go together. So over on this side, I see Alexander, and over here, I see Newton. Alexander and Newton, okay? So I look at the poem and I'm just pulling some words that I think deal with some kind of contradiction, tension, they're opposites, they butt heads, maybe they go together. So maybe they're enemies, maybe they're best friends. All I'm doing is I'm pulling some words out that seem in some way to go together. So I came up with Alexander and Newton because I saw those. What I want you to do, I'm going to time you. I'm going to give you 90 seconds. And what I want you to do is just on some paper there, don't put it in the chat because I don't want anybody else to see it yet. But on your paper, on your phone, on your keyboard, wherever you are, I want you to try to come up with 2 or 3 pairs of words that you think we could add to our chart here. Words, just words that go together, words that are opposites, however you want to look at it. I'm leaving it pretty open here for you. 90 seconds, go. There's no right answer or wrong answer here. I promise. About 30 more seconds. Ten seconds. All right. Now, you guys, I am getting very old and my eyes are really bad. You might have seen me squinting today. I squint. It's awful getting old. So I'm going to need you to unmute to tell me these because looking at the chat is a whole thing for me. There's no right or wrong. We're just looking for pairs of words. That's all we're doing. So, Carrie, you're on my screen. I'm going to ask you to go first because we're old friends at this point. We met this morning. We hit it off. You seem great. So, Carrie, give me a pair of words. No pressure here.
Okay, I have a question before I do.
Yeah, of course.
For the words, did it have to come out of what we were reading, or could it just be words that we thought could contribute?
Carrie, let me tell you this. You are so advanced. Right now, it's just for the words in the poem, but we're going to get to your part in a second. So hold that thought. I knew you were. Listen. All right. So words in the poem, Carrie. Because whatever you came up with had to come from somewhere, right?
Well, I did discontent with Alexander and then content with Newton.
Discontent and is content in the poem?
Yeah. Hang on. It was.
I see
discontent.
Do you see another word that might go with discontent or go against it? Because I want them to be words in the poem. Or anybody, something that's opposite of discontent. Anybody have that on your list? Maria? You came unmuted. Was that on purpose? Did you say it again?
Yeah. Is it a screen? Maybe?
Serene, yeah. This is one I was going to go with. But, you know, again, no right or wrong. But discontent and serene seem to, that's good. All right, let's go to somebody else. Somebody come unmute. I don't want to have to call on people. That's not fun for me or for you. All right, I see some people going to the chat. Okay, you said serene. I got you. Somebody else have a pair of words for us? Catherine, how about you? I'm just going with people I see on my screen.
I was just agree with whatever was already said. I agree that with the discontent and the serene, maybe like, well, I just lost my word.
That happens to me every day, Catherine. Is there a word in the poem jumping out at you?
I'd have to re-pull it up.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Oh, yeah.
Pick a word.
I guess profound.
Okay, profundity or profound. Do you see a word that you think would be opposite of that? Or word that you just put with it? It can be any word. If something is profound, what does that mean? It means something that we're impressed by, something clever or original or impressed. Yeah. So I'm going to help you here. I'm just going to say like, did not contribute.
Yeah, or like even maybe bland.
Say it again.
Bland.
Yeah, but it's got to be a word in the poem. So I see where. Okay, good. Let's go to another one. How about you, Colin? I wish you guys would volunteer. It would be. I hate calling on people who are just coldly, but Colin, give me something here. What do you see?
I put continent to pebbles and shells.
Oh, that's so good. So continent really big, pebbles and shells small. That's good. That's a good one. Colin, I'm going to have you call on somebody. I like that better.
Let's see who we have. Let's go with Parker.
Parker. Good morning, Parker. Or afternoon, I guess, at this point. Parker, can you give me a pair of words?
You said it had to be from the poem, right?
Yeah, it does.
All right. So this whole time I've been trying to pull up the poem, but I can't get it pulled up. So
you can't see it on my screen?
No, I can't. I'm watching this on my phone in a vehicle, so it's really hard for me to see.
Okay, well, we'll go to somebody else, Parker. It's okay.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Can we just take a volunteer now? Are we ready for that? I bet you guys have some stuff here. Don't be shy.
Maybe space and continent.
Space and continent. I like that a lot. I mean, that makes sense to me. Notice it's not even going to matter which column I put them in. I'm just throwing them on here. Space and continent. That makes sense. One up in the air, one something we can touch. How about another one, somebody?
Maybe grasp and thought.
Ooh, that's a good one. Who said that? Who was that? Whoever
Olivia.
that was. Oh, Olivia. I like that a lot. Grasp something you can really touch, thought in your brain. Those are good. How about one more, you guys? Anybody else? Okay, let's move to round two now. So round two is where we were earlier. Some of our advanced students, Carrie. What I want to do now is I want to look for words that are not really there, but kind of there. So they are not visible. I can't point to them, but they're between the lines, where they're hovering above the lines, where they're buried underneath a couple of the words. This is harder. So I want you to come up with at least, so I'm going to go and ask, let me ask somebody, who do we think of when we're talking about Newton, you guys? Who do you think we're talking about? Anybody know who Newton might be? You know any Newton? Isaac Newton, okay. What do we know about Isaac Newton? Who was he? What was he? Anybody know anything about Isaac Newton? What did he do for a profession? What was he into?
I think he was a scientist and he invented like calculus.
Okay, we'll go scientist. I like that. What about Marie? You know anything about Alexander? You know who we're talking about here? What would your guess be?
No, not exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a history person either. Anybody have a guess? I don't think it's Alexander Graham Bell. I don't see anything but a telephone. I don't think it's Alexander Hamilton from the musical. Anybody have any idea who you think? Parker, we can go back to you. It talks about Alexander. He thought the Asian continent ended with India. Any idea who you think that might be? You know any famous Alexanders, Parker?
None come to mind right now, no.
Okay. Anybody? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to tell you, Olivia and Kayla both said the Great in the chat.
Oh, they're in the chat. Okay. So Olivia and who?
And Kayla.
All right. Kayla, tell me what you know about Alexander the Great. What was he?
He was a conqueror.
Conqueror. I like that word. Conqueror. All right. So thank you. So scientist and conqueror aren't really words in the poem, but they're words that I kind of got to through your help. So what I want you to do, I'm going to give you 60 seconds this time. And I want you to try to come up with one pair of words that you think it's here somewhere because of space or continent or India or profundity or whatever. And then I'm going to ask you guys to share these in the chat this time. Okay? Let's go to the chat this time and see how that works. 60 seconds, go. I'm going to go back to the poem here so you can see it. No right or wrong, just what do these words that are here make you think of? Where do they lead you? What ideas, what concepts? And when you're ready, just throw something in the chat. This is harder, I know. Got some good ones here. Ooh, nice. So I'm going to go, I see, and again, it doesn't matter where I put them here. I'm going to go restricted and limited. I like that a lot. And I see knowledge and misunderstanding. That's a good one. And I see knowledge and ignorance. That's a good one. So I'm going to put ignorance over here. Anybody else? Let's come up with a few more. And if you'd rather talk out loud than type it, that's okay too. Oh, someone put in the private chat, greedy and grateful. That's good. And then I got another chat that says power and philosophy. I like that too. And you all can chat just to me, or you can chat at the public chat, like for everybody to see too. Anybody else? Someone said limitless. I like that too. Oh, that's a good one. Reality and imagination. Okay, these are good, you all. So notice here what we have. We took the poem and all we did is we pulled words out and we threw them on this thing. And then we tried to get to more words that aren't really there, and we put them on here too. And without even knowing that you did it, right? I want you to look at what you've done. You've talked about in some way, just by listing these words, some type of diction, contrast, juxtaposition, connotation and denotation, symbol, details, right? Tone, theme. Look here at what you come up with. We haven't even talked about the poem. And that's the takeaway here. We've not talked about this. We've not summarized it. We've not talked about what happens in it. What we've used is this strategy that I call, and this is so cheesy, I call it Poetic chart. I know, it's awful. Poetic chart. But what I have here is, take a look. I've got words from the poem that I think are relevant or important that I can now go in and weave in and out of my essay. So I can throw in words like continent, pebble, shells. I'm not going in for long quotes, but I'm going in for words and little bits and pieces that I can weave into my essay. Notice I've also got words that get me to meaning. I've got words that get me to interpretation, right? Look at that: limited, limitless, power, philosophy, scientist, conquer. Words that we're not given for free, but words that we can now do something with. I even, if this is my first 10 or 12 or 15 minutes even with this poem, sitting reading it, if you don't know where to start, just pull out words. That sounds so elementary. But when we're doing that, you guys know that everything you write has to be based on textual evidence. You got to be able to prove it through the poem. Well, this is textual evidence. This is the text. These are literally words from the poem, right? So step one is pull those words out and see if you can make some meaning from them. Then you're getting to these things about meaning, these things about interpretation, these things about theme. And without us getting all fancy like English teachers and talking about connotation and denotation and symbol, and you're doing it without even maybe knowing you're doing it. So my advice here is, if you get a poem and you don't know where to start, try to pull out words that either go together or opposites and see where that leads you. And now I have almost a word bank for my essay. If I can do something with all of this, then I'm onto something. Does that make sense? Poetic chart. If you're ever stuck and you don't know what to do, where to go, and what we're not doing here is we're not just summarizing the poem, which is what so many people want to do. All right, let's look at a second one. There's an old magazine called, I hope you know what a magazine is. It's an old version of Instagram. There's an old magazine called Life magazine. I remember as a kid, my grandma subscribed to Life, and people would send in photographs to Life magazine. Sometimes they would feature stories about celebrities and famous people and the royals, and but you could just send in an old Polaroid. So think about those old Polaroids that you might have laying around in a drawer in your home, and they've got that real sort of flimsy, hard material, and they've got the white border. And I know, like, my mom has lots of these at home in her drawer in the foyer. And you look at these and it will say baby's first Christmas, or it will say 1985 New Year's Eve, or, you know, whatever. Well, there's a poet by the name of John Updike. And John Updike saw a picture in Life magazine. He was just flipping through. Could be a fun creative writing exercise that you did. And John Updike saw this photograph and it intrigued him for whatever reason. And he said, I'm going to write a poem about this picture that I see in this magazine. And I don't have the photograph for you. I'm sure I could find it, but I don't want to see it because I like to be able to think about it in my head. I like to be able to imagine it. And the picture said, underneath it, there was a caption, and it said, Dick Schneider, that's an unfortunate name, Dick Schneider of Wisconsin was elected Greek god for an interfraternity ball. So we have a picture that we don't get to see today, but underneath it was written, Dick Schneider of Wisconsin was elected Greek god for an interfraternity ball. So in the chat, I want you to tell me what you picture when you're picturing this guy. Dick Schneider of Wisconsin elected Greek god. So where is he? What's he wearing? What's he holding? Again, I've not ever seen this picture, so it could be anything that just pops in your imagination. What do you see? Head to the chat and let's see what you come up with. He's elected Greek god for an interfraternity ball. He's from Wisconsin. He's muscular, large. I think so, probably, if he's elected Greek god. Maybe he's like super tall. I could see that, yeah. What else do y'all see? What do you think he's wearing? What do you think he's holding? He's tan, blonde, maybe wearing fancy clothes, wasp, expensive, has a toga. Ooh, I think that might be right. I was thinking maybe a suit, but you're right. If he's like a Greek god, it might be like a toga party. I like that a lot. What do you think he's holding in his hand? Shiny shoes. What do y'all think he's holding? Maybe it's just me. I've got it. Wine. I was thinking he's holding like a red Solo cup. I'm with you. Is that Trinity? I'm with you. Maybe he's holding like a scepter or a trophy, or I don't know. It's some sort of trophy. Yeah. We don't know. I don't know. A briefcase, maybe. So John Updike saw this photograph. He said, I'm going to write a poem about this guy. He didn't know the guy. He just saw a picture. So imagine if I said, all right, hop on the internet, find a picture, write a poem. That's essentially what he did here. So I'm going to read it to you. Youth Progress. Dick Schneider of Wisconsin was elected Greek god for an interfraternity ball. When I was born, my mother taped my ears so they lay flat. When I had aged 10 years, my teeth were firmly braced and much improved. 2 years went by, my tonsils were removed. At 14, I began to comb my hair a fancy way. Though nothing much was there, I shaved my upper lip. Next year, my chin. At 17, the freckles left my skin. Just turned 19, a nicely molded lad. I said goodbye to sis and mother. Dad drove me to Wisconsin and set me loose. At 21, I was elected Zeus. One thing I want to point out, notice when I read the poem, I didn't stop at the end of every line. When we read poetry, we want to read it like we do a paragraph. So that first two lines, when I was born, my mother taped my ears so they lay flat. I have students who today would say, when I was born, my mother taped my ears. So they lay flat, and it just doesn't make sense. It's hard to comprehend a poem that way. So read it like you would a paragraph. I don't think this poem is super hard to understand. I don't. I think that we kind of can get what happens here. But even if it was hard to understand, here's what I want you to think about. It's kind of a similar strategy as before, but what we're going to do is we're going to put these words from the poem into categories. So if you went through and circled the nouns or the pronouns or the verbs, whatever you wanted to do, could you put them in categories? For example, if this poem had the word witch and spell and cast and broom and black cat, then I might call it magic, and I would list those words underneath. Here, I said I think there are a bunch of people in here. I think there's mother, I think there's sis, I think there's dad, I think there's Zeus, if we want to count him, and I think there's Dick Schneider. So I'm going to call that people. I'm going to give you 3 minutes here, and I want you to come up with 2 or 3 categories. Just write them down, and we're going to see what we can add. What words do you notice? What patterns? What similarities? And we're going to throw them into a category, and you're going to give it a name. I'll tell you what, I'm looking at the time here. Why don't we just do this out loud together? That might be more fun. Does anybody see anything emerging as you're looking at the poem here? Anybody say, oh, there are a bunch of words that deal with blank. You can head to the chat, or we can just do it out loud, however you guys want to do it. I see the chat lighten up. Body. All right, and I see years as well. So let's go. Kayla, let's go to you first, and then we'll go to Dina. Is it Dina? I hope it's Dina. All right, Kayla, you said body. What body parts do you see, Kayla? Could you unmute and just tell me? Yeah.
Well, I was focusing more on like body image.
Okay.
And so he goes through the way he combs his hair, his teeth, the way his ears lay, shaving his lip and his chin, his freckles on his skin, and I think that's all.
All right. I'm trying to put down the key words here. I think I'm.
Oh, his tonsils as well.
Tonsils. Did I get them all, do you think?
I think so.
All right. That's awesome. And then I saw someone say years. Dina, is it Dina? Is that right?
Yeah.
Hi, Dina.
Right.
Dina,
Hi.
tell me the years you see.
So there's 10 years, 2 years, 14, the 17, and 19, and 21.
Thank you. I love it. Thank you so much. And then I see change, years, description. Somebody want to come off mic and tell me one of these that you see that you like? Somebody said change. I think that might go with the body image earlier. Whoever said change, could you tell me what you mean? That's Maria. Maria, will you tell me what you mean by change?
Oh, it was something we already put, like body image.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay. And then Carrie, you're saying kid to adult. Will you tell me about that?
I was kind of going off of how they said like he had freckles and then he stopped and that he was shaving and stuff. So
Okay.
Immature to looking like a professional person.
Okay, so he started to comb and shave and the freckles left. Okay, I like that. Who else has one? I'm gonna just say places in Wisconsin because I see that. Anybody else see words that you would put in some category or words that go together? And I see family. Okay. I thought about calling people family.
Something that I think kind of goes together is improved, removed, and modeled or molded. He's kind of changing himself.
I like that a lot. So I'm going to put change. Who said that?
It was me, Kayla.
Kayla, thank you. I like that. So all I'm doing once again is notice that we haven't talked about the poem. We're not summarizing it. I'm simply pulling words out that I think go together. So I'm like a squirrel gathering nuts for the winter. Or is that what they do for the winter? I don't know. I'm gathering evidence. I'm like a journalist gathering information for my story. I'm like a coroner looking at a dead body, and they're just taking notes on what they see, and then they've got to turn that into something, right? Bullet wound, scratch, bruise. Okay, this is what happened. So I take my evidence here, and I say, well, what can I do with it? So I always start with what I have the most about. And here it looks like we have the most about body parts, based on what you guys saw. So why, and again, that's what we always get to in English, Why do you think we have more words about body parts than anything else? More words about body image than anything else? What do you think our author's saying about that? Anybody have any? And again, we see what we see and we try to do something with it. Why are there, go ahead.
I think maybe because some people like think of Zeus and gods, they kind of, their own like supernatural power is connected to their physical appearance as well.
I like it. Somebody else, why more words about body part than anything else? If we're gonna look at complexity, which we have to do on this exam, that means it's more than one thing. So if that's the good thing, power and appearance, is there a bad part to that too? Is there a bad part to there being so many words about body?
It's kind of saying that his appearance is more important than anything else about him.
What do you mean by anything else?
Like, it doesn't really talk about his personality or experiences that he's been through. It's just talking about like, how he looks.
I like that. I like that. Somebody in the chat has said, then his own happiness. I like that too. Tina, are you on?
Yes.
Can I ask you a few questions here?
Sure.
So my friend Tina is happily married, but we're gonna play a little pretend here. Let's say that Tina is on the market, she's dating, and I say, I have somebody in mind I want to set you up with, Tina. Tina, what would be the first thing you wanted to know about the person?
How much money does he have?
That's a good answer. The question is, I don't know. So ask me another question. That's very honest. I like that.
Is he healthy?
I think so. Physically, he looks good. What else would you want to know? And anybody else can chime in. What else would you want to know? Tina, what else would you want to know?
Oh, they don't want to know what I want to know. I'm old, so what I want to know is completely different than what my 17-year-old, 18-year-old wanted to know.
Someone just called you iconic for getting right to the money, Tina.
Yes, honey, I am. You don't even.
How tall?
No, I don't care. Somebody said, has he ever been to jail? I don't care if he's been to jail, because maybe it was because of something, I don't know. He lied on his taxes or something. I don't care about that. I mean, if she shot somebody, I'd care. But certain things, I don't care if they went to jail.
Let me ask you this, Tina. Ask me if he loves animals.
Oh, does he have a dog?
I don't know. Ask me if he's a Trump supporter.
Does he have any animals?
I don't know. Ask me if he's a Trump supporter.
No, I can't do that.
Right. So I don't know. I don't know that either. Ask me what his college major is. I don't know that either. Ask me his hobbies. Well, he's in a fraternity. I don't know. So I think where we're getting here.
Okay. What kind of shoes does he wear?
I don't know.
Well, you've seen them.
I haven't. All I know is here. See?
Oh.
So my point here is there's
Why did I not get that?
There's some stuff that we get here about this guy, right? About his hair, his teeth, his ears, his lips, his chin. But there's a lot of stuff we don't get.
Well, I wouldn't go out with this guy anyway, because, I mean, he had to pin down his ears. And also, I mean, he just was, bless his heart. He had to have his ears pinned down. He had to have braces. He had freckles, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. But he did
I don't know if
a whole lot of,
I don't know if you know how much love you're getting in the chat, but you'll want to take a look at that.
Okay.
So my point here is, what do we know about this guy? I don't think we know enough for me to allow my friend Tina to go on a date with him. All I know really, and so we can look at it one of two ways. Yes, he's Zeus-like, power and appearance, but as you all pointed out, we don't get much about his personality. I don't know how he treats animals. I don't know if he's charitable. I don't know if he is going to align with me politically. I don't know what he does as far as treatment of his family or others. So
you want to know something funny? Do you want to know something funny?
Yeah.
My husband is a Zeus-looking man. He has blonde hair, and he's tan, and he's extremely muscular and strong.
But
he did not have to pin down his ears, but he did have braces. So.
But I don't think that would be, maybe I'm wrong, Tina. I don't think that would be enough for you.
No,
if you didn't have any substance, if you didn't have any personality, if you didn't make you laugh, if you didn't, then I don't. And so here, what I've done is I've looked and I've said, I've got more words about body than anything else. So what? Well, now I'm going to turn that into an argument. Does that make sense, everybody? Mm-hmm. All I've done is I don't have a fancy word for this. This is just called categories. But you take the words and you put them in categories and you see if you can say something about them. Now, you could argue how maybe great this guy is based on his physical appearance, or you could argue how John Updike is saying that this guy is really materialistic or doesn't have much substance. But whatever it is I'm arguing, I know that it's based on textual evidence and support, because it's based on how many words are in the poem. The opposite of this is, what do we have no words about? What do we not know here? Because our author has excluded those details. What do we not know about this guy? We don't know his personality. We don't know his emotions. Maybe he could be childish, right? We only know the physical stuff. That's good, you guys. So what I can do here is, based on just the words used, just like we did with the other poem, I could come up with something to say. Notice here, we haven't said a lot about summarizing the poem. We used a couple of pieces about the taping the ears and the combing the hair. Does that make sense? So if you get a poem and there's nothing else you can do, you're stuck. You don't know where to start. That's happened to me so many times. Some people call it writer's block. Some people get anxious because of the timing of the test. Some people just think poetry and they get a sick feeling in their stomach. But if nothing else, look at the poem, pull some words out. Do they go together? Are they opposites? Are there patterns that you can throw into a category? And if so, then can you say something about what you've come up with? Does that make sense? So when I set in on this lesson from Danny Lawrence, who taught me some of this, and I went back to my classroom and I started doing this, I found that Danny Lawrence didn't just pick a poem that happened to have a bunch of words that I could categorize. He didn't just pick a poem that happened to have a bunch of things that were in contrast or opposites. This is why people write, right? When I think about Amanda Gorman giving the reading the poem at the inauguration of Joe Biden, she's writing about things that are complex. She's writing about things where there's tension and there's opposition, right? About race, about gender, about the rights at the Capitol, that's what writers do. They write in response to things. They write to say something. And so here, we just got to figure out, well, what is it the authors are trying to say about, and again, look what you came up with, ignorance, about greed, about philosophy, about knowledge, about thought. What is it our author here is saying about someone who we know a lot about body, but not much else? And if we can use the actual words present in the poem, then we're going to be onto something. It sounds so elementary, but it certainly, if we're stuck, it certainly gives us something to say. What questions can I answer for you about those? I promise you, if you just find a random poem next week and you practice Poetic chart or you practice categories, you're going to amaze yourself that you've come up with something to say. It gives you an entry point into that poem.
I have an idea.
It is your brainstorming. It is your outlining. Go ahead, Tina.
We have 5 minutes left. What if I put a big poem up on here and let them do it real quick?
Love it.
Let me share my screen.
Does that make sense, you all? If you're struggling with poetry, these are 2 quick and easy ways to come up with something to say.
Okay. Does somebody want to read? Can you see it?
Nope.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, no, I can.
Okay. Does somebody want to read it, or do you want me to read it for you?
I can read it.
Okay, go.
Okay. My yard is not a lawn. The dandelions grow unhindered, leaving floaties on my porch. I do not spray or seed, and the bald patches stay. Violins, crabgrass, and fescue live side by side, competing for space and attention. The trees are adorned with skirts of taller grass and Queen Anne's lace. Rabbits live there sometimes. The mower blade sits high to allow the smaller things to stay, but the grass is trimmed so we don't look too wild. My ex-husband abhorred a weed. He sprayed and hacked and dug them all to oblivion. But now, my house sits in the middle of a carefully tended field, allowing all to grow, live, flourish.
I love it. We just have about a minute and a half here. Let me tell you what I would do here. So I would first look for words that are opposites. Do you guys see any of those? Yes, you want to give me some of them? Words that you all think are in opposition, where there's tension, where they're fighting, where they're combating. And I would go down that road for a couple minutes. And then I would say, do I see words that go together? Certainly, I think there are categories or patterns that we have emerging.
Maybe like oblivion and flourish.
I love it. I love it.
Maybe side by side and competing.
Oh, that's so good. Yes, yes, yes. Tended and wild, so good. So good, you all. And so you come up with those, and then you say, well, where do those lead me? Pattern of destruction versus growth. That's so good. That's so good.
Look how fast they did that.
Just like that. Right?
Just like that.
And it's grounded in the text.
Yes.
Right? You're not talking about aliens. You're talking about actual words from the poem that you can now weave in and out.
Right.
As you turn that into something. That is your Play-Doh. Those are your Legos that you're going to now build something. And that's what we do on this exam is we gather evidence and then we see where that can lead us. As I think Matt pointed out earlier, or maybe it was Brandon, those of you in one of those sessions, you don't start with your thesis. You find what's in the piece and you allow that to lead you somewhere.
Excellent.
Well, you guys were awesome. Thank you all.